I never imagined that on the 4th of July, the very day this nation celebrates freedom and independence, my own family would strip me of mine in front of everyone I loved. One moment I was setting the flag-themed tablecloth across the long picnic table in my backyard, arranging the sparklers and paper plates like I had every single year since my husband passed. The next moment, my son Ryan was standing over me with that sharp, dismissive voice he inherited from his father, saying, "Mom, move down to the end. This spot's for real family." I froze, my hands trembling against the cloth, as laughter erupted from his wife Carla and her parents, who had suddenly claimed the head of the table like conquering soldiers planting their flag. My grandkids looked on, confused, their little hands gripping the tiny American flags I'd bought them, not understanding why Grandma was being shoved to the sidelines of the celebration she had hosted for 40 years. When Ryan pulled the chair out from under me and motioned for his father-in-law to sit, I stumbled, my knees buckling as whispers spread across the yard. "She's old. She should be grateful she's even here." Those words hit me harder than the summer heat, and though I smiled weakly to keep the children calm, something inside me shattered. They thought they had won, pushed me to the corner, silenced me, erased me like an afterthought. But what my son and his wife didn't know was that humiliation has a way of waking up the part of you that refuses to die quietly. And on that very day, beneath the crackling fireworks and fake laughter, I made a silent vow. By morning, their world would never look the same again. Because freedom, my dear, isn't something you wait for others to grant. It's something you take back when it's stolen from you. If you're watching this video, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and comment where you're watching from. I love to know how far my story travels, how many kitchens and living rooms hear the voice of a woman like me who refused to be erased. My name is Margaret Collins. I'm 71 years old, and while everyone else was busy celebrating America's independence that night, I was quietly plotting how to reclaim my own. The truth is, the betrayal didn't start at that picnic table. It started years earlier, like embers smoldering under dry grass, waiting for one spark to ignite into a fire that would consume us all. As I sat quietly at the far end of that picnic table, pretending to laugh at jokes that weren't funny, memories of past Independence Days came rushing back like fireworks exploding in the night sky, each one brighter and more painful than the last. I remembered the year my husband Tom was still alive, when we grilled burgers together and he carved out that head seat at the table for me, saying, "She's the heart of this family, and the heart sits at the head." After he passed, I carried on the tradition, not for myself, but for the children and grandchildren who needed continuity, a place that always felt like home. I remembered the countless mornings I woke before sunrise to baste turkeys, frost cakes, or fold laundry for Ryan and his sister Emily when they were kids. The jobs I worked, waitressing at a diner, cleaning houses, even ironing other people's shirts so they could have sneakers that weren't full of holes and school books that were brand new. I remembered how many nights I came home bone tired, but still stayed up late helping them with algebra, or sitting on the porch so they wouldn't be alone in the dark. Those sacrifices didn't come from duty. They came from love, the kind of love that gives and gives even when it's drained dry. And yet, here I was, 71 years old, treated like some relic to be shoved out of the way so Carla's father, a man who had never lifted a finger for my children, could sit in my place of honor. It wasn't just about a chair. No, it was about erasing a lifetime of effort, as if all I had poured into this family meant nothing. As I looked around the table, I noticed things I hadn't before. The way Ryan leaned toward his father-in-law, whispering about business opportunities. The way Carla beamed when her mother complimented the house as if she owned it. The way Emily, my daughter, sat nervously twisting her napkin, avoiding my eyes altogether. Something was off. More than just petty disrespect. I caught fragments of conversation. After the summer. Transfer papers. She won't even notice. And my stomach twisted. The grilled corn on my plate turned to ash in my mouth. My family thought they could push me aside, but they had forgotten one thing. This house, this land, the savings that paid for every flag and firework, none of it belonged to them yet. And though they smiled as if they had already won, they didn't know the storm that was about to break. Because sometimes the smallest detail, a word overheard, a look caught across the table, is enough to tell you your own children are planning a betrayal so deep it makes the ground shake beneath your feet. The longer that July 4th evening dragged on, the clearer it became that I wasn't just being sidelined, I was being erased, piece by piece, like chalk washed off a sidewalk after rain. When I carried out a second tray of hot dogs to the grill, Carla's mother snatched it from my hands and said, "Don't strain yourself, Margaret, you've done enough," though the words dripped with mockery, not kindness. Ryan laughed along, loud enough for everyone to hear, adding, "Yeah, Mom, you should sit back and let younger folks handle things," as though I hadn't been the one keeping this tradition alive for decades. I forced a smile, but when I reached for a plate of potato salad, I realized no one had left me a seat at the table. They'd stacked my plate near the trash bin with the children's half-eaten watermelon rinds. My granddaughter Sophie whispered, "Grandma, I saved you some." But Carla snapped, "Sophie, don't baby her, she's fine," and shot me a glare that could have pierced steel. My daughter Emily looked at me then, her face pale and guilty like she wanted to speak, but swallowed the words before they escaped. And then came the moment that told me this wasn't just about petty humiliation. Ryan stood, tapped his glass with the fork, and announced that he had important family news. I felt the pit in my stomach deepen as he cleared his throat and said, "Carla and I have been making some big decisions about the future of this house and our family." My heart stopped. This house wasn't just a house, it was mine. The deed tucked safely away in my bedroom safe, the last gift Tom had left me when he passed. Yet Ryan spoke like it was already his to do with as he pleased, outlining plans to modernize the property, sell off half the backyard to a developer, and transition Mom into a retirement community where she'll be more comfortable. The crowd applauded as if he'd just announced a promotion, while I sat frozen, clutching Sophie's little hand under the table. Comfortable? That house was my blood, sweat, and memories. It was the nights Tom and I danced barefoot in the kitchen, the porch swing where Emily whispered her first crush, the backyard where Ryan learned to ride his bike. And now, on the day meant to celebrate freedom, my own family was plotting to lock me away like an unwanted relic? I bit my tongue, waiting, watching, memorizing every smug expression. Because if there's one thing I learned raising 2 kids alone after Tom's death, it's that silence can be a weapon sharper than words. They thought I was powerless, but little did they know I was already piecing together their betrayal like a puzzle, and I was determined to make sure that when the picture was complete, they'd wish they had never underestimated me. That night, after the fireworks fizzled out and the guests drifted home with the smell of smoke still clinging to their clothes, I stayed behind in the kitchen, stacking plates and wrapping leftovers, though my hands shook so badly I nearly dropped the foil. Ryan and Carla had gone upstairs with their children, their laughter echoing like nails against glass, while Emily left early, muttering about not feeling well. Alone in the quiet, I wandered into the study, the room Tom had once used to balance checkbooks and plan our future. That's when I saw it, an open manila folder half hidden beneath a stack of magazines on the desk. Curiosity burned through my chest, and I pulled it free, my breath catching at the bold letters stamped across the top. Transfer of ownership? My name was typed neatly in the current owner box, and in the proposed new owners line set Ryan and Carla's names, bold as brass. My eyes skimmed the legal jargon, terms about power of attorney, signatures of guardianship, retirement home documentation, and my heart hammered so loudly I thought it might rattle the windows. They hadn't just talked about moving me out. They'd already drawn up papers to strip me of everything Tom and I had built, every brick, every blade of grass, every memory. Worse yet, stapled to the back was a glossy brochure for Golden Pines Retirement Community, complete with smiling old women knitting and playing bingo, as though my life's worth could be reduced to a punch card in a weekly bus ride to the grocery store. The betrayal seared so hot, it left me dizzy. But then, beneath the rage, a cold clarity settled in. My children thought I was frail, forgetful, powerless, too blind to notice what they were plotting. But what they didn't realize was that Tom and I had built safeguards long before, protections tucked into the fine print of our wills and deeds. I pressed the folder to my chest, my pulse steadying, and whispered into the empty room, "You think you've won, but you've just declared war." I slipped the documents back where I found them, careful not to disturb the desk, and returned to my room. As I closed the door, Sophie stirred on the couch where she'd fallen asleep and murmured, "Grandma, are you okay?" I kissed her forehead, smoothing her hair, and said, "Yes, baby, I'm fine." But inside, I wasn't fine. I was sharper, clearer, stronger than I had been in years. Tomorrow, I would start making calls. By the time my family woke, fireworks wouldn't just be lighting the sky. They'd be tearing through their lives, one fuse at a time. The morning sun on July 5th streamed through the blinds, but I didn't feel weary, not after what I had discovered in Ryan's study. Instead, I felt alive, charged with the sense of purpose I hadn't known in years, as if Tom himself were whispering in my ear, reminding me that the woman he fell in love with had never been weak. I brewed a pot of strong coffee, sat at the oak table that had seen countless family meals, and pulled out my leather address book, its corners frayed, its pages yellowed but invaluable. My first call was to Jonathan Pierce, the family attorney who had handled Tom's estate since the 1980s, a man so meticulous he once caught a single misplaced comma that saved us thousands. "Jonathan," I said, studying my voice, "I need every file you have on the Collins property, effective immediately. And don't breathe a word of this to Ryan or Emily." His pause was heavy, but then came his measured reply. "Margaret, what's going on?" I told him just enough to make it clear that my children were circling like vultures. "I'll be at your office this afternoon," I added, "and I want a fresh copy of the deed in my hands." The second call was to my credit union, where Tom and I had set up accounts that Ryan never knew about. "Freeze the joint cards I authorized for Ryan and Emily years ago," I instructed, picturing their shocked faces when their precious plastic was declined. "From this moment forward, no access but mine." The third call was to Mark Daniels, the contractor who had once rebuilt our porch after a storm. He'd always admired the house and told me more than once he'd buy it if I ever sold. "Mark," I whispered, my lips curling into the first real smile since Independence Day, "I might be ready to talk soon, but keep this between us." Each call was like lighting a fuse, and with every one, the knot of humiliation I'd swallowed at the picnic table loosened. By the time Ryan came downstairs, yawning and scratching his head like a man who thought the world was still his, I had already set in motion a chain of events that would pull the rug out from under him before he knew what hit him. He poured himself coffee, oblivious, and said, "Mom, about those papers in the study, we'll need you to sign them this week." My hands didn't shake as I replied, "Of course, sweetheart, whatever you think is best." Because I knew something he didn't. By the time he shoved those papers in front of me, they would be nothing but empty threats. I had built this life, brick by brick, dollar by dollar, and if they wanted a war over my independence, then by God, I was going to give them one. And as Ryan smirked and kissed Carla's cheek, boasting about how smooth things were going to be, I sipped my coffee and thought, smooth for you maybe, but by sunset, the only fireworks you'll be seeing are the ones I set off myself. By noon that same day, the air around the Collins household had shifted. Not that Ryan or Carla realized it at first. They strutted around the kitchen like roosters, Carla bragging about a new investment opportunity her father was bringing Ryan into. Ryan puffing his chest as if he were already running the empire he thought he'd stolen. But their arrogance started to crack when Carla handed her card to the delivery man who'd brought a catered lunch for her parents. He cleared his throat awkwardly and said, "Ma'am, your card's declined." She blinked, laughed nervously, tried another, then another. Each one declined. Ryan swore under his breath, grabbed his wallet, and shoved his own card across the counter, only to hear the same dreaded words. Declined. His face drained of color, his swagger evaporating in an instant. Carla's parents exchanged looks, embarrassed, while the delivery man waited. I stepped forward with the cash I tucked neatly in an envelope that morning and handed it over with a polite smile. "Don't worry, I've got this," I said, watching Ryan's jaw tighten as humiliation carved itself across his face. He opened his mouth to demand an explanation, but before he could, his phone lit up with a series of urgent alerts. Emails from his bank, messages from creditors, notifications of frozen accounts. His fingers trembled as he scrolled, and I could see the sweat prickling along his hairline. Carla leaned over his shoulder, her voice sharp with panic. "Ryan, what's going on?" He snapped. "It's just a glitch," though even he didn't believe the lie. Within an hour, his business partner stormed up the driveway, face red with fury, waving a printed email. "You lied to me, Ryan," the man barked. "Your collateral's gone. The bank pulled everything." Ryan stammered excuses, but the partner cut him off. "You're finished. Do you hear me? Finished." He turned and left, tires screeching as his car tore down the street. The silence that followed was delicious, broken only by the sound of Carla's mother's fork clinking against her plate. They all looked at me then, really looked at me, as if seeing me for the first time. But I just sipped my sweet tea, calm as a summer breeze. Inside, though, my heart pounded with a fire I hadn't felt in decades. Every card declined, every bank account frozen, every partnership collapsed. It wasn't just revenge, it was justice. And it was only the beginning. Because while Ryan stumbled around the living room, clutching his useless phone like a lifeline, I knew there were still 2 more fuses waiting to burn. And when they did, the real fireworks would make last night's display look like sparklers in a child's hand. By evening, the atmosphere in my house was thick with tension, so heavy it felt like the July humidity had seeped into our very bones. Ryan paced the kitchen like a caged animal, his phone clutched in his hand as if a miracle text might undo the ruin unraveling around him, while Carla whispered furiously to her parents, her face blotchy with anger. I chose that moment to step forward, holding a thick envelope I had collected from Jonathan's office earlier in the day. "Since you're all already making plans for my future," I said, laying the envelope on the table, "I thought it was only fair to remind you of the present." Ryan grabbed it with shaking hands, ripped it open, and went pale as his eyes darted across the pages. This can't be right," he stammered. But it was. The deed to the house was solely in my name, protected by clauses Tom had insisted on decades ago, clauses that barred any transfer of ownership without my explicit consent. The so-called power of attorney they tried to forge was worthless. "You see," I continued, my voice calm but sharp, "your father and I planned for days like this. Days when greed might blind our children into thinking what we built was theirs for the taking." Carla's mother tried to interrupt, sputtering about family unity, but I cut her off with a look that froze her mid-sentence. "Unity isn't built on betrayal," I said. Then I pulled out a second set of documents, my freshly rewritten will. "Ryan, Emily," I said, looking at both of my children squarely, "I've made changes. Effective immediately, neither of you will inherit a dime from me. The house, the land, my savings, they will pass directly to my grandchildren, to Sophie and Jack, because at least they still know what respect means."
Emily gasped, tears springing to her eyes, but Ryan exploded, slamming his fist on the table so hard the plates rattled. "You can't do this to me!" he roared. "I'm your son!" I met his fury with steel in my voice. "No, Ryan, you stopped being my son the moment you decided to sell me off like a used car." His face twisted, somewhere between rage and disbelief, while Carla clutched my hand under the table, her eyes shining with a mix of fear and pride. Carla's father muttered something about leaving, and within minutes, he and his wife gathered their things, storming out without so much as a glance at me. The fireworks outside had long ended, but inside that kitchen, the real explosions had only just begun. Ryan shouted, Emily sobbed, Carla seethed, but I stood firm, calm as stone, knowing that for the first time in years, I held every card. And as I looked at their broken faces, I thought to myself, this was only the second act. The final blow, the one that would seal their fate forever, was still to come.
The next morning, July 6th, the air was thick with the smell of charred firecrackers still littering the street. But inside my house, it was quiet, almost sacred, as if the walls themselves knew a reckoning was at hand. I had called everyone, Ryan, Emily, Carla, and even the grandchildren into the living room, the very room where Tom and I once decorated a Christmas tree so tall it brushed the ceiling, where birthdays were celebrated, where laughter used to live. They filed in, their faces marked with exhaustion from a sleepless night of arguments and whispered blame. I stood at the mantel, holding a small wooden box Tom had carved by hand, the one where I kept my most important papers. "This house, this land, this family," I began, my voice steady, "were built on sacrifice and love. And yet, on the very day this country celebrates freedom, my own children tried to chain me down like a prisoner." Ryan tried to interrupt, but I raised my hand, silencing him. "You thought you could steal from me, humiliate me, erase me. But the truth is, I was never powerless. I chose silence for years because I wanted peace, but peace is not the same as weakness." I opened the box and pulled out the final document, the one I had signed just hours earlier at Jonathan's office, the official transfer of my estate into a trust controlled entirely by my grandchildren. Gasps filled the room as I placed it on the coffee table. Everything I own now belongs to Sophie and Jack when they come of age. Until then, it is protected beyond the reach of either of you. Ryan, Emily, you have nothing left to take." Emily sobbed openly, collapsing into a chair. But Ryan erupted, his voice cracking with desperation. "You can't do this! I built my future on this house, this inheritance." His words cut him deeper than they cut me, because the truth spilled out. It was never about love, never about family. It was about what he thought he was owed. I looked at him with a sadness so deep it nearly broke me, but I refused to let it show. "You built your future on my back," I said coldly. "Now you'll learn to stand on your own or fall on your face." Carla gathered her children, her eyes full of contempt, but Sophie pulled away and ran to me, wrapping her small arms around my waist. "Grandma, you're the bravest person I know," she whispered. And in that moment, I knew Tom would have been proud. Ryan stood there, empty-handed, his face red, his voice trembling as he shouted one last bitter word. "You'll regret this!" But even he knew it was a hollow threat, because I had taken everything they thought they controlled and placed it beyond their reach forever. As they stormed out, the sound of the screen door slamming behind them, I sat down with my grandchildren at my side and felt something I hadn't felt in years. Peace. Real, unshakable peace. I had not just reclaimed my independence, I had guaranteed theirs, ensuring that they would grow up knowing strength comes from dignity,
not deceit. And as the morning sun poured through the windows, I smiled to myself, knowing that for the first time in decades, I was truly free. If you believe independence isn't about fireworks or parades, but about standing tall when others try to tear you down, then subscribe to this channel and share my story. Because somewhere out there, another grandmother is waiting to hear that she is not alone, that her voice still matters, and that sometimes the most powerful fireworks are the ones we set off in our own hearts.